Hey, thanks everybody for joining us here. Got a little panel discussion that we're going to talk about. As you can see on the board here, we're going to talk a little bit about cash flow, using a dirty word, high interest rates. So nobody's having fun with that right now. So we've got some producers up here that are obviously making decisions day to day in their operations. They're facing this every day. Let's talk a little bit how they're making decisions. So we're going to run through introductions here real quick. We've got about 45 minutes. So we're going to run through introductions, and then we've got a list of questions that we're going to run through and have them kind of opine on their opinion as to how they're making these decisions and how it's affecting their operation day to day. So with that, thanks for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. Quick intro. TJ Wilson, I'm the director of FBN Finance with the sales team here. So I've got a team of lenders that some of you might know that are downstairs in the booth. We offer a number of different financial products, whether it's your traditional real estate loans, operating loans, equipment, and then some proprietary products called Farmland Capital. So a number of different offerings here at FBN. I want to continue to work with that. I'm also actively involved in agriculture. So my wife's family has a nice little operation in northeast Kansas that they let me be slave labor in from time to time. So do what I can to help out there. But excited to talk about this, but I'm going to let each one of these introduce themselves as we run through, and then we'll jump into the questions real quick. First up, we got Josh. Josh, if you want to give a quick intro and talk about your operation real shortly.
All right. Well, I'm from central Wisconsin and started farming in 2010 after I left college, and had about a 120-acre land base at that time, and just been trying to grow it ever since, and still going today. So
good. Next up, we got Dawn.
Hi, I'm Dawn Kleinsasser, and my husband Brent and I farm in South Dakota, east central South Dakota in the Huron area, and I know we've been farming 37 years, and we farm about 4,700 acres of corn, soybeans, and wheat sometimes. This year we planted some wheat.
All right. Thank you. Jeremy.
Yes, Jeremy Jack from the Mississippi Delta. Family operation down there. We grow cotton, corn, soybeans, rice, and wheat.
Okay. All right. Next up, Larry.
Larry Carroll from Northwest Ohio. I farm about 2,500 acres. I come out of college after my mom finally realized I really didn't want to go to college. I wanted to farm. So we come back and was lucky enough to grow the farm quite a bit. It was up to about 4,000 acres at one time. It's pretty stable at about 2,500 acres right now. It's basically a grain farm.
Okay.
I farm with my wife, Lorelei, and my son in a partnership.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Last, Paul.
Paul Anderson from Cole Harbor, North Dakota. I forgot to put my number of acres in, but we're 4,400 acres where we're at. Corn, wheat, peas, sunflowers, what we grow. Used to do the seed business. Been part of FBN since 2017. Finance customer since 2020. Very grateful. Farm with my wife and my parents that are in their dad's 81 and his planting his 61st crop this year.
Wow.
So long term in the farm there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Paul. So kind of before we get into some of the discussion, obviously we've got a wide geography base here. So how was the 22 year for each one of you, and how are you looking at this going forward? Paul, start.
Going down the line, we lost the whole month of the whole month of April to a blizzard that happened the end of the month there. So we about tore up the plan and just planted corn first when we could get into the field in May, and got started with that. Wheat went actually in June, which is really late for us, but didn't turn out that bad in quality and about an average crop. The earlier corn was better than the later corn, so we're doing all right there. Peas and sunflowers were good, so that's how our year's been.
Good. Josh?
Yeah, looked like it was going to be a disaster in the spring because it was raining all the time, but our soil moistures were pretty low to start off with, so we could handle some of the extra moisture we were getting. But It's a lot of stop and go planting, so it's stretched out over 3 weeks, which can push us into the end of May, and crop yields start to suffer quite a bit. But ended up turning out all right. Beans are average. Corn was probably a little above average. So.
Okay.
Well, in the plains of South Dakota, I would describe our year as extreme. It started out by extremely windy and cold, so he didn't start planting like he normally did because it was just so cold. And then we got extremely wet. We had about a month and a half of a lot of rain, like at once. And so then we had drowned out and we had prevent plant. And then it got extremely dry. After July 5th, we got 0 rain. So it was just extreme. The acres we harvested, the yield was average, but we had a lot of drowned out. So of course that pulled down the yield. But we had a beautiful fall. We had no rain stopped us from harvest. So we went right through. We had a beautiful fall.
Good. Larry.
There was about 3 planting seasons, middle of April, 1st of May, and then last of May. Was able to get everything in. Really no problems with weather after that. Everything come up good. We really got dry in July and August, which really hurt our bean crop. The corn crop seemed to be set, and it didn't seem to bother that. So had above average corn yields, mid to average soybean yields.
Well, I guess you could say the year was kind of normal. Normal in essence is another extreme year. For us, we started planting our corn usually in March, and about first week of April, we had to go boost all the tractors off because they were dead because they hadn't moved any. And we finally get the crop in the ground, and we hit all the extremes. It was too hot, too dry, too wet, and too cold. Just depends on which week you were farming. Fortunately, unfortunately, we were sitting on a really good soybean crop and a really good cotton crop. And then about mid-August, we got an extreme 10-day wet period, extreme high humidity, and we had soybeans that were sprouting in the pods, and which led to a lot of damage around, and not just on our farm, but the whole area. And there was a lot of cotton rotted, so it took about half the cotton crop out. And then the river dried up after that extreme wet, so it just turned extremely dry. So when the river dried up, our infrastructure is to take all the beans off the combine and put them on a barge as quickly as you can. Well, there's beans still scattered all across the delta at the moment because could not get them to the rivers quick enough, and a lot of them are damaged. So, it's got some good number 1 soybeans in the Midwest. Send them on down. We'll blend them off and make them to number 2s.
I think that's.
All right, we'll just go this route. We had the same situation in Northeast Kansas. It was, obviously a fairly good spring. Felt like we got the crop in the ground okay. And I think that's pretty much common in a lot of places. They're able to get it in. It's just the water shut off pretty much everywhere about the same time. So how mature was your crop when it shut off? And then that was really the dictator of what your yields were going to be like for that year. Next up, we'll kind of go back down the line here. Jeremy, if you want to start us, what are you looking at for 23? How's that looking for you? Are you optimistic, pessimistic? What's the outlook?
I've always been kind of a realistic optimist, and I always love the story about the optimist and the pessimist. And the pessimist says things can't get any worse than this, and the optimist says, oh yes, things can get much worse than this. And that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. We've been able to, in 22, we were able to secure a lot of products prior to going into the season, so we were able to hedge off some of the inflations that we've seen through this year. And through that practice, we've been trying to, throughout the year, knowing that we're in inflationary times, trying to find any inputs we could at good prices. And we're going into the year thinking right now we're in inflation, so it doesn't have to be spent. We don't have to have it right now. We're not going to get it until we get to that point. So we're going through everything, getting everything planned out, and going ahead and securing as much as we can to take any of those bumps in the road ahead. So I'm optimistic, but I'm also very real that it's going to be a tough year, and not a year that you got a little there's not going to be much wiggle room throughout the season.
I'd tend to agree with that. The wiggle room, I think, is going to be minimal this year. Thanks to FBN, we've been able to, acquire most of our inputs, and seed costs, I think, are going to be in line. Herbicide, I think, is all right. The thing that scares me to death is fertilizer. I just don't know how we're going to keep our hands or get our hands on it quick enough. Our local guys don't want to do a lot of buying ahead after the first of the year, where they find out what they can get their hands on it. Then they'll start coming to us. But fertility is the biggest thing that I'm worried about.
Well, we're always optimistic about the next year. Next year's always going to be a better year. And I do think there's no such thing as a normal year anymore. That's just the way it is. Everything seems to be a little extreme. We're just looking at input costs. We'll probably really try to keep our pencil sharp with the input cost. My husband's also looking at some equipment that he can get rid of. We just kind of run a pretty lean operation, and with equipment costs being so high right now, it's like, we don't need this. Let's sell this and replace it maybe with something else that we'll be able to use in more ways than the other piece of equipment. So we just kind of try to run a very lean ship. And, because I'm the woman, at least in our relationship, I'm the cheap one. And so I'm always like, no, you can't do this because, and I just think women have a different look about it, because if we can save $2,000, I'm thinking about, okay, $2,000, I can use that over here. So sometimes women just have a different outlook on inputs and costs.
I don't think I have a different outlook than a lot of other years in the past. It always seems to be something that crops up as a challenge. So I'm just taking it in stride and putting our budgets together and cash flow together and seeing how I can purchase everything and make it all work. I guess it's just kind of like a big puzzle to put together each year. So,
Yeah, from where I stand, I'm going to probably stick with my existing crop rotation. Going to probably delete the oats for next year, but otherwise it'll probably for us it'll be corn, probably more acres of peas, a little more wheat. Corn, sunflowers have been really good for us. Confection sunflowers have been really good for us the last few years. We'll stay with that, but that's a crop that can get to be a challenge to harvest in the end. We're going to watch some of the crops that don't need as much fertilizer and be working really hard to check our soil tests to see where we need to have to apply things. So try to pick those fields that are carrying a little more nitrogen in for our, target those for our corn fields. So.
All right, thanks everybody. So I think now we're going to get into really some of the meat of discussion. So obviously we're talking about interest rates. How do you make the decisions with the interest rates that we have right now? As you can see right now, in January we had prime rate 3.25. Everybody knows what rates are doing right now. That prime rate is 7% today. The way it looks, it's going to go to 7.5 next week. So that's a major impact on operation, over double, 2.5 times basically year over year with your operating line that you potentially see. Most operating lines with lenders are tied to prime. It's going to have a direct impact on your borrowing costs day to day at the bank. So how has this adjustment in interest rates, this rapid rise in interest rates, affected the decisions you're making within your operation?
We're reining in. We're not looking at buying as much as, we're not looking at new tractors or better tractors like that. Looking at, even tractor seller financing I looked at a couple of deals this summer that were north of 8% even, and I just passed on them, and we're going to make do with what we have and go from there. We had a strange deal. I run a fleet of used pickups for the farm, and a lot of 150 to 200,000 mile trucks. There's our daily driver fleet for each of the trucks. We got to the end of that blizzard that we had in April, and we were down to one functional four-wheel drive pickup between myself, my dad, and 2 hired men. And went looking for used pickups, and in North Dakota, because of the hot Bakken economy for the oil and the hot ag prices, I was not going to spend $40,000 on a 100,000 mile pickup. Discovered a couple of basic pickups that were brand new under warranty. So instead of spending a little bit of money, we spent more money than what you'd expect, but did use Chrysler 0% money at the time. So we've got better trucks. We're under warranty for the next number of years. I know my costs on those are going to be less, but that's one thing we did. Responded to interest rates, but that's one thing we did. But otherwise, if it involves spending 7% interest, we're just not going to do it. We're blessed very much that we've got our farm land loans with FBN here that we got through the process and locked those up 18 months ago, and very thankful that we've got, our rates are down at 3.45 that we locked in. I'm not smart enough and I'm not a talented enough farmer to make 10% interest rates work at, if these interest rates keep going up, the dollar is going to strengthen, and that's going to make our commodities more expensive in the rest of the world. It's make it difficult for the world to buy our output, so we're going to have to see lower prices, and I don't see how that works.
Yeah, it's going to be a struggle. It's a lot of extra expense I'm going to have to include in the budgets, and I don't know. Somewhere it's going to have to come out of either better marketing decisions or else reduced crop inputs, and you can't really wiggle it too much. So hopefully we can do better on the marketing side of things. I guess there's always room there where we can improve and hopefully make up some of that. But yeah, I was able to lock in my interest rates on my real estate here with FBN this last spring, so that made a big difference too. And then as far as equipment and capital purchases goes, I guess you just have to really weigh them out a little bit more and not do them so free willingly like we did in the past when money was cheap.
Yes, I agree. I think we're really going to have to discipline ourselves more, that if you don't need it, don't buy it, because it's going to cost money, either on your line of credit. Yeah, and I certainly don't want to take out any loans at 7% or more. And us too, we were able to lock in our real estate loan with FBN about a year ago, and that is a fixed rate for the whole life of the loan. And our other lender, it was not. So I feel a lot better about that. And like I said before, we're just looking to get rid of some stuff and maybe, capitalize on that and put that against the line of credit. And, maybe, so actually we are looking to buy some drones to do some spraying. And we spent a lot of money on application fees. And so I think we can, instead of application fee, we'll just put it towards the drone. So that's kind of money already spent. And hopefully we won't have to spray as much and maybe save some money on the chemical too. And we're just going to have to really look at chemical cost. So yeah, I think the word I would use was we're just going to have to be more disciplined.
We also had basically variable loans on all the land we're buying. That has been turned over with the help of FBN to fixed loans. That is a huge difference in what our cash flow is for the coming years. Another thing that happened to us a couple years ago is we had a huge barn fire. And we had semis, tractors, planters in the barn. All that stuff had to be replaced 2 years ago. And luckily, it happened 2 years ago because we was able to go around and replace all our equipment for basically cheaper than what we had, and the equipment was a couple years newer. So that put us in a pretty good position equipment-wise, so we don't need much right now. But basically, going to the fixed rate interest rate on the land, I think really helps, and not needing a whole lot of equipment right now.
So, when I came back to start farming out of college, interest rates were in the 6 to 7, in that time period. So it's kind of, it's where we kind of cut our teeth. But at the same time, I was born and raised in the double-digit times, and my family had moved from Southern Ontario, Canada, to the Mississippi Delta during that time. It was a phenomenal move, like 1980, If you go no history of agriculture, it's not the time to pick up and move and start fresh. But I was born and raised in those times, and we talk about those all the time. So you remember, in our mind, when we go down and we look at things, we look at projects, especially if it's a variable rate or what we're going to be doing in 2 and 3 and 5 years, we have to shock test all of those plans. And you have to put, you might want to put a 3% interest rate in there, but you need to put it at a 5, 7, 10, 12, and find out where does that project net work. So I think, as they spoke about, moving everything to a fixed rate, I think is going to be as much as you can right now. It's a little late, but it's better to do it now than to wait. You can always move it back out. The other thing is you need to, in my opinion, you need to look at every tool under the toolbox, so at least that works better. Is it a longer term loan that works better? Short term loan, whatever works to get you through that spot to make sure you cash flow, because you want to make sure you have enough cash to ride this roller coaster we're about to go on. And then the last thing I'll mention is, kind of this time of year, my kids every morning, my little girl, she's 5, she runs out 5:30 in the morning, every morning. Where's the elf? Where's the elf? Every day, my sister is our CFO, and every day is like, who's got 0% financing for this? Where is it? It's somewhere around here. Someone's got it here somewhere. So you want to look at every option and don't just do, well, we've always went down to the bank, or we always went to the farm credit office and they'll take care of us. You need to make sure that you're doing your homework and looking at every tool that you have available to you.
First of all, I didn't pay them for these advertisements, or we didn't talk about that ahead of time, so I do appreciate that. But I think that's important, Jeremy, is with interest rates 7, 8, 9, 10, double digits for some of these operations, I mean, with the cost of inputs, that's real money. That's going to have a real effect on your cash flow, a real effect on your bottom line when you're paying 10, 11, 12% potentially on the inputs that you're purchasing. So you do have to be frugal. You do have to be disciplined as to looking around what is the best deal, who has the best rate. At the end of the day, farming operation is a business, and I think we really have to look at it that way. It's a mindset shift in a lot of scenarios, but hopefully those decisions we can help make easier. It's something really to think about as you're looking at your plan for the next year. So you mentioned leasing, things like that, tools. How does the interest rate factor into the decisions you're making? Does it influence your decisions? Does it make you say yes or no if you're getting ready to do something? Or do you look at it, it's just the cost of doing business? We have to do this to farm, and we just have to have that, so interest rates are just an extra cost that we have to incur.
So how we look at it is just it's the price of the whole good. If it's something that you have to finance, you have to just add that to the cost of it. So right now we're looking at two things. We have the inflationary cost of whatever that product is, but then also the higher interest rate onto it. So, looking at the budget, we're looking at double to triple the interest that we had to that we're going to pay this year on everything that compared to last year's. Well, that money had to come from another spot in the budget to cover that. So that just cut down a lot of our projects. And like I said, it just makes whatever project or every purchase we're going to make has to pay for itself more to make sure that we can do it, or we just won't do it. So I think that's the big thing, is just planning ahead and have that in your head that, okay, I'm going to go buy this, it costs this amount of money. No, it's going to cost this amount of money plus another 5% or whatever the percentage is than it did last year. And you're making sure you don't realize that next December. You're thinking about it now.
That sounds like the discussions with my wife and kids a lot of times, Jeremy. If you're going to take some money and spend it here, it's got to come out somewhere else in the budget. So there's only so much to go around.
We have quite an extensive cash flow program, and I totally agree. If you're going to use money you have to have it from somewhere. So these decisions to buy new equipment or used equipment, there's some pretty good used equipment around there, but trying to go to an auction anymore is almost impossible. I see how much used equipment is selling for, and it's like, how do you justify it? I certainly don't have the answer for that, but the interest rate is really going to be a big problem here in the next year or two.
Yep. Well, I think on the line of credit, you just have to do it because you have to have a line of credit. As far as purchasing things, I think there again, like I said, you just have to be disciplined. There are some things you just don't have to have that you can farm again without it for the next couple years until things calm down, if they ever do calm down. And like for our line of credit, I'm looking into a fixed line of credit, which I don't know, a couple years ago I never heard of, and then I started asking some people, and my banker he looked at me like he'd never heard that before. And I thought, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm not the smartest person in the room. Why are you looking like you've never heard this before or you don't want to do it? So there again, I'm just going to shop around because there's lots of lending agencies. And so I think that to me feels safe right now because that's a variable that I would know. So, or that's an amount that I would know instead of being a variable rate, which in 3 months I don't know what it is. So if we get that fixed line of credit, at least we know how to budget, through that. So those are the things I'm looking at.
Well, I guess when I'm looking at buying equipment or any other capital purchase, first I make sure it's going to cash flow, and then as far as whether the interest rate matters or not, I'm looking at how much more it's going to go up in value over the next couple of years. If John Deere keeps raising their prices 10-20% every year, I guess you can still build quite a bit of equity into your equipment, even if rates are 7-8%. So kind of depends on how I'm feeling about inflation that day and whether I want to buy it or not.
As I look over the last year, the only thing that's gone down in value in my portfolio of things that I own is my bank account. The dollars in the bank account are the only thing that's gone down in value. Everything else has gone up. But where I'm, looking at for where I farm and the land in our neighborhood, we've had a lot of land appreciation. We've got we're blessed with a coal plant in our county that takes about 70,000 acre footprint out of our good flat farmland, and so we've got very aggressive operators, very good legacy farms that want to farm at scale. So our area is very competitive, and to try to purchase land that's going to raise 50 bushel wheat and 120 bushel corn and buy land at $7,500 an acre, I'm in jeopardizing my grandchildren with if I try to purchase land out of the proceeds of the commodity sales. So that's not something that right now looks very promising. I don't think these are high interest rates yet. I think that we're going to see they're going to keep going and fighting this inflation. And I'm not opposed to seeing higher interest rates. I'm lucky now that I have mine locked, but higher interest rates, I think, benefit the prudent in the future. And being positioned for when that train wreck comes. So if I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self in 1984 what to do, it would have been, hey, buy land in 1987. And maybe 1987 is coming, and I want to be ready for it this next time. So that's what I'm trying to position, and keep my ability to borrow in good condition for 10 years from now, when there's going to be if we see interest rate trends continue up, I want to be positioned to take advantage of those opportunities that maybe where somebody else has had some misery and it hasn't gone well for them.
So I told this group I probably wouldn't spit any questions on them impromptu, but I may change that. So keep them on their toes a little bit. We had a presentation yesterday. We had a presentation over the lunch about land values and how inflation is affecting those values, how that's affecting the overall market. When you're looking at interest rates, obviously we've seen the inflation, we've seen interest rates rise up to where they are right now. How do you feel like the interest rates are going to have a direct impact of land values in your market?
It'll take a while, but looking at it, it's got to come down eventually. It has to.
Same answer, probably. It's going to take some time to work through, but I also think there's a lot of money chasing land right now too that isn't requiring the same rate of return that's going to bring down land values. So as of right now, I don't really see it having a big impact on it.
Right, I agree. As of now, I don't see it having an impact. There's a lot of money out there. I mean, just in our, neighborhood, there's a lot of outside money that is coming in and buying up land, so I don't see it affecting it.
In our situation around Northwest Ohio, I don't see it making much of a difference. There's so many other outsiders coming in, buying farmland. I don't think they're borrowing the money to do it. They've already got the money, and the local farmers are trying to compete those prices, but I don't think interest rate at these levels is going to make much difference. Now, maybe if we double it, it might.
So a little bit different in our world. It's kind of a two ways to look at it almost. A lot of the land is owned, there's a lot of owned by farmers and families, passed down, et cetera. But there's also a lot of land that's owned by funds and large buying groups. And, if interest rates go up, they can easily sell that land and get a higher rate of return in the market or someplace else, much safer. And so it depends on, do they diversify their portfolio and can stay in farmland? But then at the same time, a lot of the tracts of land they have are large tracts of land. So then you're looking at a higher interest rate, and a 2,000 acres shows up for sale. You've got to be able to buy it and pay a higher interest rate. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for us in our area.
I won't spring any more questions on them here, but really the final thoughts I have here is interest rates are awful right now. I mean, comparatively to what we've seen over the last couple of years, it's painful when we're looking at cash flows. It's painful when we're projecting out buying real estate, making equipment purchases. We've got to, as Jeremy mentioned, we've got to use every tool at our disposal. I won't give you a hard sales pitch, but definitely go down to our booth, talk to the FBN team. Look at those tools, look at what you have at your disposal. The way I look at interest rates, unfortunately, and like we kind of talked about, it's a cost of doing business. Now, everything we're doing right now is more expensive. Our interest costs are no different. They're just more expensive right now. So how do we build those into the budget? How do we build those into our cash flow? How do we build those into our planning for the future? It's not fun. We have to get a sharp pencil, as Dawn said. We have to be more diligent in our risk management strategies and our risk management plan because the margin for error is smaller. So we have to think about that with all the dollars that we are using in ag, both from the input side and the dollars that we are selling from a revenue basis. The margin for error is very small. A little mistake can make a big difference. And when you're talking interest rates at 8, 9, 10%, that difference can be magnetized with some sort of error. So I think it's very important for us to talk about it, sit down, use what you have at your disposal, talk about those different scenarios, and really work through, as he talked about, the stress testing, the shock testing. What can your operation afford from a break-even scenario, and figure out what you can sustain long-term. So I promised them I wouldn't let there be questions from the crowd, and I didn't want to spring that on them. But if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to catch me afterwards. Happy to talk through that with you, or any one of these. But I appreciate everybody giving them a round of applause for being on the panel. So, thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time. Thank you.